The forest was alive with shadows, the kind that seemed to breathe and shift in the pale moonlight. Trenton adjusted the strap of his satchel and tightened his grip on his plasma knife. Nights like these weren't unusual for him. Scavenging the outskirts of human settlements had become second nature, yet tonight something felt off. A faint sound stopped him mid-step. At first he thought it was the wind, a mournful whistle cutting through the trees. But then he heard it again. A voice, soft and desperate, carried by the night air. Human, please. Trenton froze, his instincts screaming at him to leave. He had heard stories of alien traps, voices luring humans into the unknown only to ambush them. But this voice wasn't threatening. It was trembling, drenched in fear. He scanned the shadows, his sharp eyes searching for movement. Slowly, he advanced, every step deliberate. The sound grew clearer, leading him deeper into the forest. Then his flashlight caught the faint outline of a figure slumped against a tree. It was an alien. She was tall and willowy, her silver skin shimmering faintly under the moonlight. Her hair, a cascade of metallic strands, clung to her face as though it had been dampened by sweat or tears. Around her wrists and ankles were thick metal cuffs glowing faintly with an ominous red hue. Trenton stopped a few feet away, his knife still in hand. "Who are you?" he demanded, his voice low but firm. The alien woman looked up, her glowing green eyes meeting his. They flickered weakly, like dying embers. "Please," she whispered, her voice breaking. "I need your help." "Help?" Trenton scoffed, though he didn't lower his knife. "What makes you think I'd risk my neck for you?" She winced, her head drooping as though the effort to speak was too much. "If you don't, he'll come back, the jailer. He'll take me?" Trenton narrowed his eyes. "Who? What's this about?" Her breathing grew ragged as she tried to sit up straighter. "The jailer, a hunter from my world. I'm a prisoner. If he finds me, he'll harvest me," she said, her voice cracking as she shivered. "Every part of me, piece by piece." Trenton felt a chill creep up his spine. He'd seen his fair share of cruelty, but this was a new level of horror. Still, helping an alien could mean trouble, a lot of it. "You think I'm just going to trust you?" he asked, his tone harsh. Her glowing eyes met his again, this time pleading. "You don't have to trust me. Just let me stay with you one night. Hide me until morning." Trenton sighed, glancing around the forest. The smart thing would be to walk away, let someone else deal with it. But the desperation in her voice wouldn't let him leave. "Fine," he said gruffly. "But if this is some kind of trap, you'll regret it." Her relief was palpable as she slumped back against the tree. "Thank you," she whispered. Trenton didn't respond. He stepped forward, cutting the glowing cuffs from her wrists with a sharp twist of his knife. The restraints fell to the ground with a metallic clink, and the red light dimmed. "Can you walk?" he asked. She nodded weakly. "I'll try." With a deep breath, she pushed herself to her feet. Trenton caught her arm as she stumbled, her body swaying unsteadily. "Easy," he muttered, slipping an arm around her waist to steady her. Her skin was cool to the touch, smooth like polished stone. They moved slowly through the forest, the silence between them broken only by the crunch of leaves beneath their feet. Trenton's cabin wasn't far, but every step felt like an eternity. He kept glancing over his shoulder, half expecting this jailer to appear out of nowhere. When they finally reached the cabin, Trenton pushed the door open and guided the alien woman inside. The space was small and cluttered, with a single bed, a wood-burning stove, and shelves lined with scavenged supplies. "Sit," he ordered, motioning to the bed. She obeyed, sinking onto the edge of the mattress. Trenton grabbed a blanket and draped it over her shoulders, noticing for the first time the faint scars crisscrossing her arms. "What's your name?" he asked, pulling up a chair to sit across from her. She hesitated, as if unsure whether to answer. "Lara," she said finally. "Lara," he repeated, testing the unfamiliar syllables. "I'm Trenton, and now that you're here, you better start talking. What's your story?" Lara pulled the blanket tighter around herself, her gaze fixed on the floor. "I was a counselor on my homeworld," she began. "We were supposed to protect our people, but the council became corrupt. They began using prisoners, those who opposed them, for experiments." Her voice trembled and she took a shaky breath before continuing. "I tried to expose them. They labelled me a traitor and sent the jailer after me." Trenton frowned. "What kind of experiments?" She looked up, her green eyes glistening with unshed tears. "Genetic harvesting. They take parts of us, organs, skin, even memories, and trade them to other species. We become nothing but commodities." Trenton leaned back, his jaw tightening. "That's sick." Lara nodded. "I escaped before they could process me, but the jailer has been hunting me ever since." "And now he's here," Trenton said grimly. "On Earth?" She nodded again, her expression bleak. "I thought I could hide, but he always finds me. If you hadn't come—" Her voice trailed off and she shivered. Trenton rubbed a hand over his face, the weight of her words sinking in. He had no love for aliens. Most humans didn't after the war. But this was something else. "You said he might track you here," he said after a long silence. "How?" Lara hesitated. "The cuffs. They emit a signal. He'll know they've been removed, and he'll come looking for me." "Great," Trenton muttered, standing abruptly. "So now I've got a murderous alien on my doorstep. Perfect." Lara flinched at his tone, her shoulders hunching as if to make herself smaller. He sighed, running a hand through his hair. "Look, I'll deal with it," he said more gently. "But you need to rest. If he shows up, you'll need your strength." Lara nodded, her expression grateful. "Thank you," she whispered again. Trenton didn't respond. He turned to the window, peering out into the darkness. The forest was silent, but it no longer felt peaceful. As Lara settled onto the bed, Trenton checked his rifle, his mind racing. He didn't know what he'd gotten himself into, but one thing was certain. He wasn't going down without a fight. The silence of the forest outside Trenton's cabin had a heavy weight to it, as though the trees themselves held their breath. Inside, the air was warmer, but no less tense. Lara sat curled on the bed, her metallic hair catching the faint flicker of light from the oil lamp. Trenton paced a small space, his rifle slung over his shoulder, glancing toward the window every few moments. "You're sure he'll come?" Trenton asked, his voice low but edged with urgency. Lara nodded. "He never stops. The cuffs, they're like a beacon. He would have sensed the signal being severed." Trenton muttered a curse under his breath. He wasn't a stranger to danger, but facing an alien predator hunting his prey across planets, that was new territory. He tightened his grip on the rifle. Its weight was small comfort. He wasn't sure how effective it would be against whatever this jailer was. But he wasn't about to sit by and wait to find out. "Tell me more about him," Trenton demanded, stopping his pacing to face her. "What are we up against?" Lara looked up, her glowing green eyes flickering with a mix of fear and sorrow. "He's not like me, not like most of my kind. The jailers are bred for their purpose, strong, ruthless, unrelenting. Their senses are heightened far beyond what humans or even other species possess. He'll track me by scent, sound, maybe even the faintest disturbance in the air." Trenton clenched his jaw. "And you couldn't have mentioned that before I brought you here?" "I had no choice," she said softly, her voice breaking. "If I stayed in the forest, he would have found me before morning. You're the first human I've encountered who hasn't tried to harm me." Trenton felt a pang of guilt at her words, but pushed it aside. "What's his weakness?" "Everyone has one." Lara hesitated. Their strength is also their flaw. The jailers are conditioned to follow orders without question, to hunt their target without deviation. If you can disrupt his focus, confuse him, he'll falter. Trenton nodded slowly, filing the information away. He checked the ammunition in his rifle again. A nervous habit, more than anything. He wasn't sure how to confuse an alien predator, but he'd figure it out when the time came. The hours crept by, each one stretching longer than the last. Lara drifted into a fitful sleep, her breathing shallow and uneven. Trenton stayed awake, sitting near the window with his rifle in his lap, his ears straining for any sound out of place. It came just past midnight, a faint rustling outside, so soft it could have been the wind. Trenton's muscles tensed as he leaned forward, peering into the darkness. The forest, bathed in silver moonlight, seemed undisturbed, but his instincts told him otherwise. He stood slowly, careful not to make a sound, and moved toward Lara. He placed a hand on her shoulder and shook gently. Her eyes fluttered open, and she bolted upright, fear instantly overtaking her drowsiness. "He's here," Trenton whispered. Lara's breath quickened, and she clutched the blanket around her. "We have to leave." "No," Trenton said firmly. "We stay. I've got traps set up around the cabin. If he comes, he'll have to get through those first." Her eyes widened. "You don't understand. Traps won't stop him." "Then we'll fight," Trenton said, his voice steady. "I'm not letting him take you." Before Lara could argue, a loud crash echoed from outside. Trenton spun toward the door, his rifle raised. The sound was followed by a low, guttural growl that sent chills down his spine. Lara whimpered softly, her hands gripping the edge of the bed. "Stay here," Trenton ordered, his voice barely above a whisper. "Don't move unless I say so." He stepped toward the door, his pulse pounding in his ears. The growl came again, closer this time. Trenton opened the door just enough to peer outside. The traps he had set, a series of tripwires rigged with noisemakers, were untouched. But the clearing in front of the cabin wasn't empty. The jailer stood. At the edge of the tree line, his massive frame illuminated by the moonlight. He was humanoid in shape, but distinctly alien, with a chitinous exoskeleton that glinted darkly. His eyes glowed red, scanning the cabin with predatory intent. Long, clawed fingers flexed at his sides, and his chest heaved with every breath, as though he were scenting the air. Trenton's stomach dropped. The thing was even more terrifying than he'd imagined. He took a steadying breath and stepped fully outside, raising his rifle. "Looking for someone?" he called, forcing his voice to sound confident. The jailer's head snapped toward him, and a guttural snarl erupted from its throat. It stepped forward, moving with unnerving grace for something so large. "You will hand her over," the jailer said, his voice a deep, resonant growl. "She is mine to claim." "She's not yours," Trenton shot back, his finger tightening on the trigger, "and she's not going anywhere." The jailer tilted his head, his glowing eyes narrowing. "You are brave, human. Foolish, but brave. Step aside, and I may let you live." "Not happening," Trenton said. He fired a warning shot into the ground at the jailer's feet. The creature didn't even flinch. "So be it," the jailer growled. He charged, moving faster than Trenton anticipated. Trenton fired again, this time aiming for the jailer's chest. The bullet hit, but instead of stopping him, it ricocheted off the exoskeleton with a metallic ping. Trenton swore and dove to the side as the jailer swung a massive claw, narrowly missing him. From inside the cabin, Lara screamed. The sound distracted the jailer for a fraction of a second, and Trenton used the opportunity to scramble to his feet. He grabbed a flare from his belt and ignited it, the sudden burst of red light momentarily blinding the jailer. "Lara, run!" Trenton shouted. The cabin door burst open and Lara stumbled out, her metallic hair catching the flare's glow. She hesitated, her eyes darting between Trenton and the jailer. "Go!" Trenton yelled. The jailer recovered quickly, his glowing red eyes locking onto Lara. He lunged toward her, but Trenton intercepted him, slamming the butt of his rifle into the creature's side. The jailer roared, swinging a clawed hand that sent Trenton flying backward into the dirt. Lara screamed again, but this time it wasn't fear. It was rage. She raised her hands, and a shimmering blue energy erupted from her palms, striking the jailer in the chest. The creature staggered, momentarily disoriented. "Nice trick," Trenton muttered, struggling to his feet. His ribs ached from the impact, but he forced himself to move. "Do it again." Lara hesitated, her hands trembling. "I can't. It takes too much." "Then we need another plan," Trenton said, glancing around the clearing. His eyes fell on a small canister near the cabin, a homemade explosive he'd been saving for emergencies. This definitely qualified. "Keep him busy," Trenton shouted, sprinting toward the canister. Lara nodded, her green eyes blazing with determination. She raised her hands again, sending another blast of blue energy toward the jailer. This time, he dodged, closing the distance between them with terrifying speed. Trenton grabbed the canister and twisted the top, activating the timer. He turned back just in time to see the jailer grab Lara by the arm, lifting her off the ground. "Let her go," Trenton roared, hurling the explosive at the jailer's feet. The canister detonated with a deafening boom, engulfing the area in a blinding flash of light and heat. Trenton was thrown backward again, landing hard on the ground. When the dust settled, he scrambled to his feet, coughing as he waved away the smoke. The jailer was gone. "Lara," Trenton called, his heart pounding. "I'm here," came her weak reply. She was slumped against a tree, her silver skin scorched in places but otherwise unharmed. Trenton rushed to her side, his relief overwhelming. "You okay?" She nodded faintly. I think so." He helped her to her feet, his hand steady despite the adrenaline still coursing through him. "We can't stay here. If he survived that, he'll be back." Lara looked up at him, her green eyes filled with gratitude. "Thank you," she whispered, "for everything." Trenton gave her a small, grim smile. "Don't thank me yet. We've still got a long way to go." As they disappeared into the forest, the night closed in behind them, hiding the smouldering remains of the battle. The jailer was defeated, for now. But Trenton knew this wasn't over. Their fight for survival had just begun. The forest felt alive with an eerie intensity, every rustle and whisper amplified in the wake of the explosion. Trenton and Lara moved swiftly, but cautiously, staying close to the thick underbrush. The moonlight barely filtered through the dense canopy, casting fractured shadows that seemed to watch their every step, shift and dance as they passed. "We need to put distance between us and that cabin," Trenton said, his voice low but urgent. His grip on the rifle was firm, though his shoulders ached from the earlier fight. Lara nodded, her breath shallow. She stumbled slightly on an exposed root, and Trenton caught her by the arm. "Are you hurt?" he asked, glancing at her scorched skin. "I'll heal," she replied, though her voice trembled. "My body is resilient, but the energy I used to fight him has drained me." "Then we move slower," Trenton said firmly. "No use running if you collapse before we get anywhere safe." She looked at him with a flicker of gratitude, but didn't argue. The two pressed on, weaving their way through the undergrowth. The forest was dense here, and Trenton hoped it would slow the jailer down as well, assuming the creature was still alive. They reached a small stream just before dawn, its gentle babble a stark contrast to the tension in the air. Trenton motioned for Lara to sit on a flat rock while he crouched beside the water, scooping some into his hands and drinking deeply. "You should hydrate too," he said, nodding toward the stream. Lara hesitated, then knelt beside him, cupping the water in her hands. She sipped cautiously, her glowing green eyes scanning the surrounding woods. "You've been on Earth for how long?" Trenton asked, breaking the silence. 3 months, she said softly. I was sent here to observe, to learn about your kind. Trenton raised an eyebrow. And what have you learned? Her lips curled into a faint smile. That humans are both fascinating and terrifying. You're capable of great kindness, but also immense cruelty. Your world is beautiful, yet scarred by conflict. I didn't expect to become part of it like this. Trenton chuckled dryly. Yeah, well, Earth has a way of surprising everyone. So does life. Her smile faded. I didn't think I'd survive the jailer's pursuit. I thought he'd take me back to the council. Or worse. Trenton frowned. What's this council want with you anyway? Why go to such lengths to hunt you down? Lara's expression darkened. The council fears what I represent. They sent me to observe humans because they see your species as a threat. But I started to question their motives. I saw potential for something more. Cooperation. Maybe even understanding. The jailer was sent because I defied them. Trenton nodded slowly. So they don't just want you back. They want to make an example of you. Yes, she whispered, her voice barely audible. He sighed, running a hand through his hair. Well, they're not getting you. Not if I have anything to say about it. As the first light of dawn broke through the trees, they resumed their trek. The forest thinned as they approached a series of rolling hills, the open terrain both a blessing and a curse. They'd be able to move faster, but they'd also be more exposed. Trenton scanned the horizon, his sharp eyes searching for any sign of movement. We'll head to the old mining tunnels, he said, pointing to a ridge in the distance. They're abandoned, but they'll give us cover. Lara looked at him with a mixture of hope and doubt. Will it be enough? It has to be, Trenton said, his tone leaving no room for argument. The journey to the tunnels was grueling. Lara's energy waned with every step, and Trenton found himself half carrying her by the time they reached the entrance. The dark maw of the tunnel loomed before them, a gaping hole in the rocky hillside. Stay here, Trenton said, setting her down gently against a cool stone. He raised his rifle and stepped inside, scanning the darkness. The air was damp and musty, but the tunnel seemed empty. After ensuring it was safe, he returned to Lara and helped her inside. They moved deeper into the tunnel, the dim light from the entrance fading until they were enveloped in darkness. Trenton lit a small lantern he'd brought from the cabin, its warm glow casting flickering shadows on the walls. Lara leaned against the rough stone, her breathing laboured. I don't know how much longer I can keep going, she admitted. You'll rest here, Trenton said. We'll both rest, but not for too long. She nodded weakly, her eyes closing as exhaustion overtook her. Trenton sat nearby, his rifle across his lap, and listened to the faint drip of water echoing through the tunnel. The respite didn't last long. A low, guttural growl echoed from the tunnel entrance, sending a chill down Trenton's spine. He shot to his feet, his lantern swinging wildly as he scanned the darkness. He's here, Lara whispered, her voice barely audible. Trenton nodded, his grip on the rifle tightening. Stay behind me. The jailer's silhouette appeared at the edge of the lantern's glow, his red eyes gleaming with malevolent intent. His exoskeleton was scorched and cracked in places, evidence of the earlier explosion. But it hadn't slowed him down. You cannot escape, the jailer snarled. Surrender now, and I may grant you a quick death. Trenton raised his rifle. Yeah, I'll pass on that offer. The jailer lunged, moving with terrifying speed. Trenton fired, the shot echoing through the tunnel, but the bullet ricocheted off the creature's armoured chest. He dove to the side as the jailer's claws slashed through the air where he'd been standing moments before. Lara, run, Trenton shouted, his voice reverberating off the tunnel walls. I won't leave you, she cried, her green eyes wide with fear. You don't have a choice, he barked. Go. She hesitated for a moment, before turning and disappearing into the darkness. The jailer growled in frustration, his attention briefly diverted, and Trenton used the opportunity to grab a nearby rock and hurl it at the creature's head. "Come on, you ugly bastard," Trenton taunted. "Let's dance." The jailer roared, charging at him again. Trenton dodged and weaved, using the narrow confines of the tunnel to his advantage. He couldn't outmatch the creature's strength, but he could outmaneuver him, at least for a little while. As the battle raged, Lara reached a hidden alcove deeper in the tunnel. She pressed her back against the cold stone, her heart pounding. She closed her eyes and focused, summoning the last reserves of her energy. The jailer had to be stopped once and for all. The sounds of battle echoed through the tunnel, each crash and roar reverberating off the stone walls. Lara clenched her fists, her glowing green eyes narrowing with determination. She couldn't leave Trenton to face the jailer alone. If she fled now, she would condemn both of them, and possibly many others, to a grim fate. Her breathing steadied as she tapped into the remnants of her energy reserves. A faint light began to emanate from her body, illuminating the darkness around her. Her people's energy manipulation was limited on Earth, but desperation and willpower could push her beyond her limits. She wouldn't let Trenton sacrifice himself for her. Back in the main tunnel, Trenton ducked another swipe of the jailer's claws, narrowly avoiding the serrated edges. He was running out of room to maneuver, and his rifle was useless against the creature's exoskeleton. Sweat dripped down his face, mixing with the grime on his skin. "Damn it," he muttered, glancing around for anything he could use to his advantage. His eyes landed on a weakened section of the tunnel ceiling, where cracks spiderwebbed through the rock. The jailer lunged again, and Trenton rolled to the side, coming up with his back against the wall. "You're not as smart as you look," he said, aiming the rifle at the ceiling. He pulled the trigger, and the shot rang out, striking the weakened rock. A shower of debris rained down, and the jailer snarled as he was momentarily disoriented. But the collapse wasn't enough to trap him. "Trenton!" Lara's voice called from deeper in the tunnel. He turned to see her approaching, her body glowing with an otherworldly light. "What are you doing? I told you to run." "I'm not leaving you," she said firmly, stepping closer. "We'll face him together." The jailer's red eyes locked onto her, and he growled. "Foolish girl, your defiance will only prolong your suffering." Lara raised her hands, the green glow intensifying. "You underestimate us both, humans and my kind." The final stand began. The jailer charged, his claws slashing through the air. Lara thrust her hands forward, releasing a pulse of energy that struck the creature square in the chest. The force sent him stumbling backward, but his exoskeleton absorbed most of the impact. Trenton didn't hesitate. He darted forward, grabbing a jagged piece of debris from the floor and plunging it into one of the cracks in the jailer's armor. The creature roared in pain, swiping at him with a backhand that sent him sprawling. Lara advanced, her energy swirling around her like a storm. She summoned another wave of power, this time aiming for the cracks in the jailer's armor that Trenton had exposed. The blast hit with precision, and the jailer howled as his chest plate shattered. "This is your end," Lara said, her voice steady but filled with emotion. "You will not harm anyone else." The jailer staggered but managed to launch one final attack. He lunged at Lara, claws extended. Trenton, still dazed but determined, threw himself in front of her, using his body as a shield. The claws raked across his shoulder, drawing blood. But he didn't falter. Lara's hands flared with light, and she unleashed her full power. The energy engulfed the jailer, consuming him in a blinding flash. When the light faded, the creature lay motionless on the ground, his body lifeless. Trenton collapsed to his knees, clutching his wounded shoulder. Is it over?" Lara knelt beside him, her glowing hands hovering over his injury. "Yes," she said softly. "It's over." The aftermath. They rested in the tunnel for several hours, neither speaking as they caught their breath. Lara attended to Trenton's wound, using her energy to accelerate the healing process. The effort left her visibly drained, but she refused to stop until he was stable. "Why did you do it?" she asked, finally breaking the silence. "Why risk your life for me?" Trenton looked at her, his expression serious. "Because it was the right thing to do. You didn't deserve what he or your council was trying to do to you, and because I couldn't stand the thought of losing you." Her eyes softened, and for a moment she said nothing. Then she reached out and placed a hand on his. "Thank you, Trenton. You've shown me that humans are capable of more than I ever imagined." He chuckled weakly. "Well, don't go spreading that around. We've got our fair share of bad apples too." She smiled, a genuine warmth in her expression. "Every species does, but you're different." A new path. With the jailer defeated, the two knew they couldn't stay in the area. The council would eventually send others to investigate, and Lara's safety was far from guaranteed. They decided to leave the forest behind and head toward a remote region where they could remain hidden while planning their next move. As they travelled, their bond deepened. Trenton shared stories of his life on Earth, his struggles and triumphs, and Lara opened up about her experiences on her home world. They found solace in each other's company, their connection growing stronger with each passing day. One evening, as they sat by a small campfire under the stars, Lara turned to Trenton. "I don't know what the future holds," she said, her voice tinged with uncertainty. "But I know I don't want to face it alone." He reached out, taking her hand in his. "You won't have to. We'll face it together." Hope for the future. Their journey was far from over, but they had found something worth fighting for: each other. Lara's strength and resilience inspired Trenton, while his unwavering determination gave her hope. Together, they were more than just survivors. They were a testament to the potential for unity between their worlds. As they disappeared into the horizon, leaving the chaos and danger behind, one thing was certain: their story was just beginning.